They were the queens of the sky, the original jumbo jets that revolutionized travel. But while the world sent the Boeing 747 Classic to museums, Iran still sends it to the skies with hundreds of passengers. This isn't about nostalgia, it's about necessity. A 4-decade-long sanctions war has made it impossible for Iran to buy new planes or parts. Keeping these 50-year-old jets flying is a daily miracle of engineering, but it's a miracle built on a foundation of immense risk, hidden costs, and a staggering number of tragedies. In the modern world of aviation, efficiency is king. Airlines operate fleets of sleek, twin-engine jets designed for maximum fuel economy and reliability. But over the skies of Iran, a different reality exists. Here, the golden age of air travel never ended. Passengers step aboard magnificent Boeing 747's classics, elegant Airbus A300s, and nimble Fokker 100s, aircraft that most of the world retired to boneyards decades ago. This isn't a choice driven by nostalgia, it's a stark necessity born from decades of geopolitical isolation. The numbers paint a staggering picture of an industry frozen in time. While the average age of the global commercial fleet hovers around 12 years, Iranian airlines operate aircraft with an average age approaching 30. For the national flag carrier, Iran Air, the situation is even more extreme. Its workhorse Airbus A300s are over 42 years old, relics from an era before glass cockpits and digital systems. This disparity is thrown into sharp relief when compared to its neighbors. The fleets of airlines in the United Arab Emirates and Turkey average just 7 to 8 years old. Iran's aviation sector is, by every measure, a flying museum. But what many overlook is that this headline number doesn't even tell the full story. For every vintage jet you see in the sky, another one sits grounded. It's estimated that at any given time, over half of Iran's entire registered fleet is parked and inactive, not because of a lack of demand, but due to a crippling shortage of spare parts. How do you maintain a 50-year-old jet when the manufacturer is legally forbidden from even speaking to you? The decrepit state of Iran's fleet is not an accident or a failure of management. It is the direct intended outcome of a 4-decade-long economic war. Since the 1970s, a complex web of international sanctions led by the United States has systematically severed Iran's access to the global aerospace industry. This isn't a single wall, it's a multi-layered labyrinth designed to create total isolation. The siege began after the revolution, when the US imposed a sweeping trade embargo, cutting off the supply of parts for Iran's then-modern American-made fleet. But the true linchpin of the blockade is a seemingly technical but devastatingly effective regulation known as the 10% rule. This rule prohibits any company in the world from selling a product to Iran if 10% or more of its value, whether in parts, technology, or labor, is of US origin. You see, a modern airliner is one of the most globalized products on Earth. Critical components like engines, avionics, and software are often sourced from American companies. As a result, virtually every commercial aircraft built by major manufacturers like Europe's Airbus, Brazil's Embraer, or Canada's Bombardier easily surpasses that 10% US content threshold. Even Russian and Chinese jets have been found to contain enough American parts to fall under the rule. This single regulation transforms a unilateral American policy into a de facto global embargo. It's the reason Iran can't simply buy new planes from other countries. It's a straitjacket, ensuring the nation's fleet remains technologically frozen in a bygone era. For decades, this has been the suffocating reality, but for a brief, fleeting moment, it seemed like the long winter was finally about to end. Between 2016 and 2018, a diplomatic breakthrough promised to change everything. The Iran Nuclear Deal, or JCPOA, led to a lifting of sanctions on the civil aviation sector. For the first time in nearly 40 years, Iranian airlines had a legal pathway to modernize their fleets, and they moved with breathtaking speed. The world watched as Iran Air, the national carrier, announced a series of monumental deals that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. The shopping spree was staggering. Iran Air signed contracts for 200 brand new aircraft, 100 from Airbus, 80 from its American rival Boeing, and 20 advanced turboprops from ATR. Other carriers like Asaman Airlines followed suit, placing orders for dozens of new Boeing 737 MAX jets. In total, the country planned to acquire well over 230 modern aircraft, a multi-billion-dollar effort to replace its entire fleet of flying fossils. These weren't just commercial deals, they were a powerful symbol of a new era, a promise that diplomacy could deliver a safer, more connected future for the Iranian people. The first few deliveries were met with national celebration. A brand new Airbus A321 and two A330s touched down in Tehran, the first new Western jets to join the fleet in a generation. 13 new ATR turboprops soon followed, bringing modern technology to smaller domestic routes. But the optimism was short-lived. Even with sanctions lifted, major international banks remained wary, reluctant to finance the massive deals for fear of future political fallout. Then, the window of hope slammed shut. In 2018, the United States unilaterally withdrew from the nuclear agreement and reimposed all sanctions in a campaign of maximum pressure. The licenses authorizing the aircraft sales were revoked overnight. The deals collapsed. Of the more than 230 jets ordered, only 16 ever made it to Iran. The dream of a modern fleet vanished, leaving the country with a handful of new planes and a sky still dominated by the ghosts of the jet age. The failed deals reinforced a hardline narrative. Diplomacy had failed, and survival would once again depend on ingenuity alone. But this ingenuity came at a horrifying price. With the dream of a modern fleet turning to dust, Iran's aviation sector had no choice but to double down on the one thing it knew best: survival. Faced with a renewed and even harsher blockade, it perfected a sophisticated playbook for keeping its ancient fleet in the air against all odds. This resistance economy is built on a foundation of illicit deals, systematic decay, and remarkable domestic skill. The first pillar is a global high-stakes game of cat and mouse. To get around sanctions, Iran relies on a clandestine shadow supply chain stretching from Dubai to East Asia. It's a world of front companies, third-party brokers, and secretive financial transactions. You see, a shell company in a neutral country might order a sensitive engine part from a legitimate supplier, claiming it's for a local airline. Once the part arrives, it's quietly repackaged and shipped to another intermediary, perhaps a freight forwarder in the UAE, which then arranges the final illicit transfer to Iran. The thing nobody tells you is the incredible cost of this system. With each middleman taking a cut, a single part can cost up to 7 times its normal market price, placing an enormous financial strain on the airlines. But the greatest danger isn't the price, it's the uncertainty. Is that critical engine component a genuine factory new part, or is it a convincing but uncertified knockoff? Or worse, is it a part harvested from a completely different aircraft that suffered an accident itself? There's no way to know for sure. Every successful transaction introduces a dangerous variable, an element of trust in a world of shadows. When the black market fails or the price is simply too high, engineers turn to the second pillar: their own boneyards. The systematic cannibalization of grounded aircraft has been elevated to an art form. The tarmacs at Tehran's Mehrabad airport don't just look like parking lots, they function as open-air organ banks. A working engine is pulled from one jet to keep another flying. The landing gear from a derelict Airbus is transplanted onto a sister ship. Avionics, hydraulic pumps, and even passenger seats are swapped to meet immediate needs. But this is an inherently unsustainable strategy. It's a system eating itself to survive. Every part taken from a grounded jet pushes it further from ever flying again, shrinking the finite pool of available spares in a slow-motion death spiral for the fleet. This has forced the rise of the third and most impressive pillar: a robust domestic maintenance and reverse engineering industry. Deprived of manuals and support from Boeing or Airbus, Iranian engineers have become masters of keeping old technology alive. Organizations like the Iranian Aviation Industries Organization have developed the capacity to overhaul complex 1970s-era engines and even manufacture certain non-critical parts themselves. Paradoxically, the extreme age of the fleet is a perverse advantage here. The analog gauges and and mechanical systems of a classic 747 are far easier to repair and replicate than the complex, software-driven architecture of a modern airliner. A fleet of Boeing 787s, with their proprietary software and composite materials, would be impossible to maintain under these conditions. The Flying Museum can only exist because its exhibits come from a simpler mechanical age. This combination of illicit procurement, cannibalization, and indigenous skill is what keeps the planes flying. It is a staggering display of resilience, but the true cost of this strategy is not measured in dollars, it's measured in human lives. The decision to operate a 50-year-old fleet with parts of questionable origin has created a high-risk environment with devastating consequences. Since 1979, more than 2,000 people have been killed in aviation accidents involving Iranian carriers. It is, by any measure, one of the worst safety records in the world. While official accident reports often cite pilot error or mechanical failure, the sanctions regime is the critical underlying condition that makes these failures far more likely. The crash of Caspian Airlines Flight 7908 is a stark example. Just 16 minutes after takeoff, the Soviet-era Tupolev jet suffered a catastrophic engine failure, leading to a fire that destroyed the flight controls. All 168 people on board were lost. The investigation pointed to a fatigue failure in an engine compressor, a classic sign of an aging component reaching the end of its life. Operating such an old aircraft was a direct result of being barred from Western markets, and the lack of certified parts made proper maintenance a near impossible task. Years later, the crash of Iran Azeman Airlines Flight 3704 told a similar story. An ATR-72 slammed into a mountain, killing all 66 people on board. The investigation blamed pilot error in severe weather, but what many overlooked was the aircraft's history. It was 24 years old and had only recently been returned to service after being grounded for 7 years for extensive repairs. It had reportedly suffered technical problems just weeks before its final flight. The pilots may have made the final mistake, but they were operating a compromised aircraft within a system that prioritizes keeping planes in the air, no matter the underlying risk. This is the grim reality of Iran's aviation logic. The economic costs are crushing, with high fuel consumption and exorbitant part prices strangling the industry. But the human cost is the true tragedy, borne by the passengers and crews who step aboard these flying relics every day. To the outside world, this persistence seems like madness, but for the Iranian state, it is a calculated risk, one deemed acceptable for a much larger strategic purpose. And that's when you realize the planes themselves are not the primary mission. The decision to fly a 50-year-old fleet defies all commercial logic. The inefficiency is crippling, and the safety risk is immense. So why does Iran persist? The answer lies in a cold, strategic calculation where civil aviation is not a business but a critical instrument of state power. The most telling example is Mahan Air, the country's largest private airline. Nominally a commercial carrier, it has long been sanctioned by the US for acting as the logistical arm of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. For years, its aging wide-body jets formed a vital air bridge to Syria, transporting weapons, funds, and personnel to support the Assad regime and its proxy, Hezbollah. More recently, these same aircraft have been identified as the primary transport for Iranian-made drones and missiles being sent to Russia for its war in Ukraine. This dual-use role makes the airline an indispensable tool of foreign policy. Its survival is not dependent on ticket sales, but on its strategic value to the state. Beyond this military function, maintaining a national flag carrier is a matter of profound national pride. In a country that defines itself in opposition to American pressure, the sight of an Iran airjet landing at an international airport is a tangible victory. It is a symbol of defiance, proving that Iran cannot be completely isolated from the world. The regime is willing to absorb huge financial losses to maintain these routes because the goal isn't to run a profitable airline, it's to project the image of a sovereign state that refuses to be broken. To see another incredible tale of aviation engineering, check out our other videos.